All right, lay of the land. Um, Something interesting to note, one of the branding exercises I was working on years ago was for Syracuse, New York, to be branded as the Heart, HEART, with the ART in caps of New York. So, of course, working on arts and culture and creative tourism and, all that type of stuff. And this red line here, it's a little hard to see with all the labels, but this red line is the city jurisdiction. So if you zoom out and you kind of look at it, it almost is like the shape of a heart, not the cartoon heart, more like the organ with its four chambers. And so you have two intersecting highway systems, 690, which goes east-west, and Interstate 81, which goes north-south. And so you have these four major sort of sectors of the city. And if you live here, people from Syracuse. It's very east side, south side, north side. As you can see, west side. Um, so zooming out a little bit further, just real quick to give you a sense. Um, in terms of the state of New York, which is this guy here, um, you can't get any more dead center than that. Granted, it's sort of odd shaped, but you might as well cut this off. This is the Adirondacks. That's not really a population center. An attraction, by all means. But really, New York is sort of and here's downstate. New York City. So that's really kind of Hudson Valley, a world unto itself. So upstate New York really is this big chunk of land here, and here's the Finger Lakes region, and what we call Central New York is a little broader than that. And so again, it is pretty much the epicenter and equidistant to a lot of really cool other cities to the east, west, south, and north. Um, so just to give you a quick layout, just like a lot of other cities in North America, we do have a lot of agriculture and, sort of forested areas, natural areas around the dense urban city. You can see how gray it gets here, where that's the urbanized area, how super gray it is here in the dead center. But we are blessed with all this wonderful green space. But we, unlike a Portland, Oregon, or anything like that, there was never any urban growth boundaries. So, there's no incentive to keep building density in the city core. It's really more or less a taste of choice. And so, really the past 100 years is about, excuse me, leaving the city center and populating the suburbs around the city, actually building the suburbs. A lot of these were probably little one-horse towns until the 30s, 40s, 50s, and all of a sudden they became small little villages and mini cities unto themselves. So population declined. I think Syracuse between 1950 and 2000 lost something like 70,000 residents to the suburbs or to other cities. A lot of jobs gone, a lot of the manufacturing, brown collar, blue collar, working class jobs gone. So because the Old Erie Canal ran through this way, the lake is here. Because the old industries really kind of came in right along this ribbon here and then populated sort of this core district here in the flats, and they drained the swamp and started developing more in here. This is the central business district, sort of the downtown. Excuse me. But by and large, my first stint in Syracuse, this was really just sort of offices, cultural amenities such as the major sort of civic centers and such, museums. But as it relates to like a hip, cool, funky happening downtown, there were spots, but it by no means was thriving. And then beyond that, you get to this sort of donut of neighborhoods with maybe the university as the exception, but right along the university, you could include that, where you had a lot of disinvestment, you had a lot of vacant houses, a lot of split family homes, a lot of single family homes, a lot of mixed use commercial buildings that have sat vacant for a long time, are dilapidated, and they haven't been really sort of holistically looked at in a way in which neighborhood directed development and sort of super local reinvestment can happen. So it's a lot of been just sort of putting out fires, going to the areas that are suffering the most, and doing what can to bring them back. And 20 years later, there are a lot of things that are working, and there are a lot of things that one could say are either still not working or maybe not even being addressed. So without getting into details, the interesting kind of script flip, as it were, is that the central business district is now flush with investment. There's cranes in the sky. Pretty much everything above the second floor is residential. Everything that used to be offices is either still offices, refurbished to offices, or residential. Vacant buildings who hadn't seen a tenant in 30, 40, 50 years are being filled. So there's a most definitely an inflow of capital and investment going into the central business district. A lot of the sort of outlying piazzas and plazas and areas that weren't necessarily in the heart of the area, kind of around here, Franklin Square and the near south side, and so on and so forth, Warren Street. They're all on the up and up. Everything within this bubble right here, and I'm sure the next wave is going to be all this surface parking, because once you get the hyper density going on, you can't start pushing out again too fast. You have to start really looking at, do we need all these cars? Can we put them somewhere else? Because people do want to live downtown. So, there's things going on at the waterfront. There's the creek walk. There's, a lot of the elevating Erie is going to open up a recreational trail down Erie Boulevard. So there's a lot of big things going on, but probably the biggest sort of elephant in the room, as I keep floating over this map, is really this guy here. So from about this juncture to about this juncture, well, depends on who you're talking to, but this is an elevated viaduct that runs through, the city. And if you're local, it's infamous. It's something that people have lived with since the 50s. But again, I mentioned in an earlier video, these were all kind of intact, contiguous neighborhoods that kind of got blown through, and these massive kind of brutalistic things got put in their place, including the highway itself. And now it's sort of seen its useful life, and either the feds are going to widen it and make it more of a superhighway, or, as some advocates want, they're actually going to tear it down and remove it, which would open up a lot of this area for development and kind of reroute traffic all over the place and around the city and stuff like that. I have put forth a plan to turn it into a skyway, a linear esplanade and park that would be connecting the university area through sky bridges, recreational corridor right through the city with native plant features, and under the carriage, different skate parks and basketball courts and micro markets and food kiosks and other things. Kind of the principle of it, in essence, being that it's already there. It can't take cars and trucks anymore, but it can take people and plants and little, kind of newsstands and benches and stuff like that. So why tear it out? Why throw it into a landfill? Why take all that money and stuff and just to rip this out? You could actually build buildings right up against it. You could incorporate structures around it. And it's happening all over the world. So I put a lot of that information out there. And anyhow, I'm trying to make a bridge here between what I was learning in these sort of experiences elsewhere, and coming back to Syracuse, what do I have to offer? And with my past being really, in Syracuse at least, being about arts and culture and youth, sort of empowerment and grassroots development, it made sense that, for me at least, that I could bring that back to the table, together with what I learned with Superfresh and our food business, our organic business, what I learned about living off the land in Belize and in southern Vermont on the farm, what I learned out at the Buddhist retreat facility for the year I lived out there, and what I learned about sustainable transportation and land use in Ithaca. So this is all kind of coming into sort of the Jake Master Plan, and how I can employ my experiences and my visions and the concepts I've been working on, and use them in a productive way here in the Syracuse area. So let me pause this, and we'll kind of use that as an entree into the next. But as I fade out here, one of the things that's really intriguing about Syracuse as a layout is because, again, it's hard to tell um, when it's, from these perspectives, but it really is a dense urban environment. You kind of have all these neighborhoods are on hills, and most of them have these beautiful parks at the apex of the hills. And so this is really a tiny little cereal bowl. So all of downtown and all of this area that's I'm circling here is very accessible, very bikeable, very walkable, and it's an intriguing proposition to be looking at Syracuse as, again, another model, what I would call eco city, because the layout and the functionality of the city is there, and yet at the same time it has almost all the problems you'd want to try to solve to use as a demonstration.